This is the first episode of the Agronomy Answers Podcast. I'm Zach Hefty, joined today by my dad, Brian Hefty, the CEO of Hefty Seed Company. And today, I thought the best way to start out the first episode is to talk about the story of Hefty Seed Company and the brand and just talk to you face to face and let everyone know what's going on. Now, future episodes won't be exactly like this, but I wanted to start out this way. Let's get into it. So, back in the day, it started in 1969. You were born in 1968, so you were very young when
What do
the
you mean?
company started.
I was already selling herbicides and making recommendations back then. So
obviously the company was as big as it is today on day one. No,
Right.
That didn't happen. So what was the original vision for Hefty Seed Company when it started?
there wasn't a vision. So basically, the way it worked is my dad was a farmer in Iowa. And it's kind of interesting. Let's take it back a few years earlier than that. His sister was going to school in Sioux Falls at Augustana College at the time. And she had a friend who she was setting up with my dad on a blind date. Well, that girl got sick. So at the last minute, she had to find somebody else because he'd driven 200 miles to come on this blind date. And she lined up the girl who eventually would be my mom. So that all worked out great. But anyway, they farmed in Iowa for a couple years. And Dad just said, I didn't want to do dairy. It, for me, was like being in prison every morning, every night with the dairy. I didn't want to do it. I wanted to do more crop farming. And so at that same time, in like this 1968 kind of time frame, my mom's parents were going to retire from the farm. My grandpa was going to be a full-time banker and go into that. So he was getting rid of the farm. He was selling the farm. And so that's when my parents talked to my grandparents and said, hey, could we buy the farm? And they said, sure, you'll have to pay appraised value, but you can buy the farm. So they did. And so when my dad came to South Dakota, he just often told us, boys, it was like I dropped off the end of the earth. Because when I was in Iowa, I had great rain, I had great soil, we were raising corn and soybeans, getting good yields. I come to South Dakota, they're barely raising any beans. The yields aren't much, the weeds are terrible, the soil's not great, we don't get the rainfall. It was a big challenge, and one of the biggest things was just when I come back to that weed control thing, he said he went into the local elevator that first spring, the spring of 1969, first year that he was up here, and he wanted 3 different herbicides. Well, he said that 2 of them they'd never even heard of, and the other one was like double the price of what he could get it for back in Iowa. So he went back to Iowa, got all 3 of his herbicides, and he figured as long as he was going back for himself, he was talking to other neighbors at the time, and they're like, well, yeah, we'd try some of that. And so he brought some things back from people for other people, and that's really how it got started.
But also, on the same sense, started in the garage, and then it started moving up and stuff like that. But how long did it take before my grandpa, Ron, started from one person to another person, or started like leveling up the company, basically?
Well, I mean, obviously I was a kid, so I don't know all the little last details of exactly when these things happen. But I do know we built 3 sheds on the farm, 1972, 74, and 76. So it was getting out of the garage, as you say, it really started in 1969, 1970. But so by 72, we had somewhere else to store some ag chemicals. And the interesting thing is we didn't even have cement floor in all of these buildings. We do part of it at a time. And I'm like, that you realize how tough times really were back then when you're only pouring cement in a little part of a small building because that's all you can afford and just kind of going from there. But one of the biggest things that he said accelerated his business, it wasn't talking about people or anything like that. It was I don't remember if the year was 72 or 73, but as my dad's story would go, Nixon devalued the dollar. So it's not exactly what happened. But anyway, because of the devaluation of the dollar, all of a sudden that made exports from the U.S. really easy because it was cheap for foreign countries to buy our grain. So grain sales just exploded. And all of a sudden, the corn and soybean prices, they just skyrocketed. So when farmers have money, what are they going to do? They're going to invest more money in the crop to get even more money back. So everybody was scrambling, trying to find herbicides, insecticides, all that kind of stuff anywhere they possibly could. My dad scoured the country, finding things for people. And like I say, that's really what got his business going to that next level.
Now, in the 70s and 80s were not the best times
The
on the farm.
80s.
The 80s.
Yeah.
And so that's not long after Hefty Seed Company was really a thing.
Yep.
And so what were some of the lessons that he took from that have grown into what the business has become today?
Well, the number one, so a few years before my dad died, so he passed away in 2019. So it's been a few years ago now. But anyway, I got to talk to him a little about the 1980s. And I basically just said, Dad, tell me a little bit more about the 80s. How'd you survive the 80s? And he said one of the biggest problems that happened is bankers saw farmers with expenses up here, and they said, you got to cut it down to here. And so guys were cutting everything. And he said the problem was guys in some cases were cutting things that were making them money. So it just drove them into bankruptcy that much faster. So he just said, I don't care if you're rich or poor. I don't care if crop prices are high or low. You have to always look at what's making you money and what's not. So if you aren't doing research, if you don't have numbers, you're just guessing at things, that's not probably very good. You've got to really look hard at the numbers and really study this stuff every day. That's why you got to spend time in fields. It's why you got to go through all your yield maps and all this stuff and try some things out. Because if you don't know what's making you money, you don't know what to cut and what to keep. So that's probably the number one lesson. Also, just to step back a little bit, my grandpa and his brother owned two banks, and we talk about the farm crisis. Timing is everything in business. They lucked out and sold their two banks in 1979 before the farm crisis. So they didn't get rich or anything like that. I mean, they made a little bit of money. But anyway, the point was, had they held on and had they been in the 80s, I mean, there were a lot of banks that went bankrupt. They lost everything. And so we were real lucky there. And for my dad, he was lucky that he made it through the 1980s. It was very tough times, not just for farmers, but also for retailers.
Okay, so you talk about some of the core principles that your dad gave you that is moved through the business from the beginning. One of the things is the agronomy side.
Yep.
Hefty Seed Company focused more on the agronomy than just selling stuff to sell stuff. How has that taken form, or why has that been one of the core principles?
Yep. So I wrote a book about 15 years ago or so called $100 an Hour Jobs, Lessons from Dad. And one of the things that he talked about quite often is you just want to help the farmer make more money. And I say that all the time to customers that, look, when an agronomist comes to work here, I tell them, your number one job is not to sell product. Your number one job is help the farmer make more money. Now, I mean, we're lucky, I will admit, that farmers have weeds, they have diseases, they have insect issues, they need to plant seed. So granted, we are going to sell things in order for the farmer to make money. But the point is, you don't want to ever recommend anything that isn't going to make the farmer money. We want to do things and we make pennies, and hopefully the farmer's making dollars. And we have to have that good agronomic information to go along with this. We don't want to just be order takers. We got to figure out what helps and what doesn't help on the farm and give our best advice that we can.
And that goes along with my next question that's different about Hefty Seed Company versus other companies that supply crop protection products is they might align with one single supplier versus all the suppliers, because then you can make the best recommendations. Has that been from the start where you want to look at all the different products versus just one?
Yeah. And so I get it when you aren't a very big retailer that you want to align with one company or another because they're going to basically incentivize you more to sell more of their products. I totally get that. But we just have always said we want to make sure we have everything available. And that way, when I'm making a recommendation to a farmer, the farmer doesn't say, well, that's just what you have in the shed, or that's just what you need to sell me. Look, I don't care what you buy. It doesn't make any difference to me. We got everything. And if you don't want to buy, I guess that's fine too. But I'm just trying to help you make more money.
Yeah. And then one of the stories that you talked about when you were coming back into the business or helping out in Hefty Seed Company is it started obviously with one store location that we're at right now.
Yep.
And it's moved now to over 50 locations. What was the turning point?
Well, 49,
thing?
But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. What was the turning point from starting at one and then being able to expand to more than one? Or what was the story behind that?
I wouldn't really say there was necessarily a turning point. It's just that when my dad had kind of always had this dream of opening another store. and he wasn't going to do it by himself. So I was getting done with college, and right after college, I worked for FMC for about a year and a half. And during that time, he was talking to me about, hey, I'd like to open another store. Would you be interested in coming and working at this store? Because I'll be honest, I didn't think I could work at all with my dad ever. On the social end of things, talking about personal stuff, no, that wasn't going to work. I don't know if my dad ever played catch with me. We never talked about sports. He didn't hunt or fish or anything else. It was work and business 100% of the time. Well, as it turns out, in a working relationship, it actually was pretty good. But I said, all right, well, if I can be at Centerville an hour away, that's even better. So sure, I'll give that a shot. So I was at the Centerville store as that was opening and for about 8 months. And then we realized I kind of needed to be back here. And so it worked out good because Darren was getting done with college at that time. And then he went down to Centerville and I ended up coming up here because we had a lot of stuff going on here. And then basically it was kind of my job to train everybody. So anybody that started with us even today, I'm still the lead trainer on everything. I just have always been a big believer in we got to have great agronomy information. It's super fun to learn it for me, and I like teaching it, whether it's teaching it to farmers, teaching it to agronomists, teaching it to college kids. I don't care. I actually really like teaching.
Yeah, which we'll get into a little bit about the teaching of helping agronomists become better with agronomy to be able to help farmers. But before we do that, one of the interesting things that I don't think very many people know is that Hefty Seed Company was called like Hefty Farm Supply before.
Till 1984 when we changed the name to Hefty Seed Company, and that's after we built our first seed cleaning plant here at Baltic.
And that's the next part of it is now it's called Hefty Seed Company, which means we have our own line of soybeans and now corn. What started the process of being able to have your own seed? Hefty soybeans is what it started with. Why did you decide to create that, or why? What was the point of that?
So Dad was always selling seed over the years and for a lot of different companies, and then he just started doing his own thing. But it's been something that has always kind of gone hand in hand with ag chemical, and it really does today because of all the herbicide tolerant traits, and for that matter, BT traits, everything else. So it's really integrated seed and chemistry together.
Now, on the Hefty corn side or soybean side, really, for corn specifically, though, you can get those similar traits from other seed companies all around. But what makes it different coming from Hefty Seed Company, or what's like the biggest point that you talk about that makes it different than the rest?
Well, so this is our first episode. Episode number 2 could literally be on that, and I could spend half an hour talking about it. But yeah, there are a lot of different things, whether it's seed treatment, how we do production, what our quality standards are. I mean, there are a lot of different factors, but I would just say I feel very confident that when I, on our farm, are planting Hefty brand corn or Hefty brand soybeans, it's the best possible stuff that I can buy in the market. It's reasonably priced, and we are going to get the most yield of anything else that is out there.
Now, I've been training to be an agronomist as well, as just like a bunch of agronomists in Hefty Seed Company do. But we spend a lot of time training. What was the story behind starting a bunch of training, and how much training do we actually do or get from you to help the agronomists out?
I always tell people that agronomists here spend about 10% of their time in training. And I guess it was just always something for me that I felt was really important. So if I go back to when my dad was kind of running things, he wasn't, he was a pretty good business person, but he was fairly emotional, and a lot of things he did were kind of last minute and more reactionary. And so I tried to learn from that, and I just said, I don't want that. And employees don't like that at all. They want a plan, and what do things look like? And quite frankly, I plan stuff out for a year in advance. So a lot of times I give a calendar to our people to know what's coming up at all these different dates and targets, when we have prepay things. We have so many things that are planned out. So I really like that. But then to kind of go along with that, it's, okay, well, if we're going to do a good job making these recommendations, what's the plan for training and how are we going to do that? But the challenge with that is there is no one set thing where, I can teach you everything and it's going to be perfect, because every area is different. And I want agronomists to have some freedom too to do what they think is best. And I will just say I've learned more from farmers than I have from anything else, more from farmers than college, than I mean, just it's so important to talk to a lot of farmers, find out what's working in the field, and every year is a little bit different. So we have to be flexible. We have to understand that things are going to change, weather's going to change. There are a lot of variables that go into this. So I'm trying to learn from our agronomists just like they're trying to learn from me.
Switching gears a little bit back into more of the business side of things, Hefty Seed Company is a family-owned company by you, basically, and or by our family.
Our family.
And so how does that vary or change compared to companies maybe that aren't family-owned? What are the differences that you see on our end?
Yeah, biggest thing is if you've got a board of directors, and especially if you're a stock company, then you probably have quarterly numbers you've got to hit. And that means you're most likely going to do some things that let's just say you have to hit certain numbers so you do things you wouldn't normally do in the general course of business. I can do whatever I want because we look at things once a year. So I'm just trying to look at yearly profit. And also, I'm not going to lose my job. So in corporate America, if you don't hit your numbers, let's say 2 or 3 quarters in a row, you're probably fired. You're probably out on the street again. Whereas here, we understand the market. Like in 2019, a third of our state didn't get planted. Well, that was no fault of our agronomists or anything that I did. So we have to take all those things into account. But I would just say we're able to make changes fairly quickly based on what's going to help our farmers, what's going to help our agronomists, and try to do the right thing out there. And I'm not nearly as focused on profit as what I find a lot of our competitors are. Now, we have to have some profit or we're out of business. But I'm just saying I can really make adjustments as time goes on. So I just think I have great flexibility. It's a good position that I'm in. And also working with family, I will say that's one of the biggest challenges a lot of farmers talk to me about is they have to work with their family. Well, I get to work with my brother every day. I get to work with my sister a fair amount. So, yep, there is some of that. But the great thing is we all have kind of found our individual roles to things. So even when my dad was around, he worked on a lot of construction of different facilities. And so I kind of ran things overall, set pricing, stuff like that. Darren's much better in the field. He can tell you about weeds and genetics and all that kind of stuff better. Janelle's been behind the scenes and helped us with the TV show some years ago and does a lot with the radio show now. So everybody kind of fit into their own role. And then none of us, I would say, were so proud that it's always got to be our way. It's kind of like when people ask, well, how do you and Darren decide what to do out in the fields? And I go, we just always say this. If he has one idea, I have another idea. Even though I might 100% think his is wrong, I'm like, well, let's try them both in the field and we'll prove it in the field and then see who's right.
Yeah, and one of the other sides of things that people might not realize out there is that as young agronomists are learning and training, obviously we don't know every single thing out there.
Nobody does, though.
But the key cool thing about at Hefty Seed Company is you and Darren always have you're always available for us to be able to call or to text or to ask questions that we're seeing in the field so we can be able to help make the best recommendations for growers that they might not know about, or, oh, you guys are leading the company, but you're not actually out with the agronomist.
Yeah. So this is one of the other things that I often tell the big companies we work with. I just say, if you compare us to a lot of our competitors, for a lot of our competitors, there is basically a money man running things, or it's somebody who came up from, hey, they were running a floater or whatever, and now they're running the company. Well, how much agronomy do they actually know today? And I just always tell people, I'm trying to be the best agronomist in the country. I realize that's an almost impossible goal, but I am literally trying to be the best agronomist in the country, and so is Darren. And so we figure if we keep our focus on agronomy number one, then that will trickle down through our whole company, and everybody understands we got to have agronomy and the farmer. That's got to be the focus first.
Okay, so just a few last questions. I know there's a lot of different things that make Hefty Seed Company different, but in your opinion, what are the top things that are different between Hefty Seed Company and really anyone else?
The number one thing, I guess, whoever you're working with, it's What kind of relationship do you have with your agronomist? What kind of service are they going to end up providing? Can we get any product you need whenever you need it? Do we have a good, fair price? And I just say there are a lot of little things when you look at us versus a lot of our competitors. Sure, we can both supply you products, but how do we do that? How do we take care of you? What kind of training can we give you and information can we give you? And now we're doing a lot more with soil testing, with field scouting, with making recommendations on fertilizer that we may not even sell. We're trying to make sure that we're able to provide you variable rate population maps for seeding and things like that, and give you the very best recommendations for weeds, insects, diseases, any issue you may have out on the farm, including your soils.
So to finish up here, where do you see kind of the industry or Hefty Seed Company going like in the upcoming future?
Well, it's kind of like you asked me before about, oh, what was this vision in the beginning, or how did it go from one store to 49? Look, there's no grand plan of, well, we're going to go from this level to this level way up here. We just figure if we keep the focus on the farmer and the focus on agronomy, things are going to work out well in the long term. We're not into, oh, we have to reach this certain level. We got to get this status or prestige or anything else. And I get it. I'm on TV and on the radio all the time, but I don't need recognition. I don't really care about any of that stuff. I'm just trying to do good things for farmers. We've been super unbelievably blessed over the years. And so we try to do a lot of charitable things. We're trying to help people. We care about people, both our employees and our farmers. And that's really what I care about in the future. I don't care so much about how many stores do we have or how much do we have for sales or anything else. If the people we're working with are happy and successful, then I'm good.
Yeah, which is awesome. And it's really cool to listen to the stories, because if you're listening to this or watching this, you're probably thinking, oh, he's Brian's son. He probably knows all these stories. And that is not actually the case. I don't know every single story. So it is very interesting to me, too, just to hear about what the story is kind of from the start of Hefty Seed Company, because I haven't been around that long, and the company started a lot longer before I was even born. So it's pretty interesting to hear about that, especially on the first episode of the Agronomy Answers podcast. There'll be a lot more that you'll want to stay tuned for, other agronomists, other topics, some other fun topics too, and more learning about what Hefty Seed Company is in whole in the Agronomy Answers podcast. Thanks for listening or watching. Stay tuned for the next episode.